I just want to do God's will.
The kind of revolution that the world needs is a Christian revolution.
If you want a miracle, you've got to expect it to happen.
You're the recipients of God's grace and God's blessings, and you rejoice in that reality.
Welcome to Life Today Live. I'm Randy Robinson, and you know we got the election coming up, and so we're going to hit a couple of things here right before the election. And according to the Democrat Party, Vice President Kamala Harris, abortion is the biggest issue in the election. Now, according to the Republicans, it's not, but let's take the Democrats at face value and say, okay, biggest issue that we're voting on Tuesday, if you haven't already voted, is abortion. And their position is they want to nationalize abortion. Right now, it is at the state level. Since Roe versus Wade was overturned, that's Trump's position. I don't fully agree with it either. And so, let's just be honest about where we're at. But we're going to talk about abortion. And, it's one thing, it's funny because they're like, well, you're a man, you've never had, it's true. I am also the result of an unwanted pregnancy. I was an unplanned child, so I feel like I have a little bit of stake in this game. I've also had 4 children, which means I've seen things like sonograms, and they inform how I believe. I'm also a Christian, so I read the Bible, and it informs how I believe more than anything. But combined all those things together, and I have a pretty solid position when it comes to abortion, which is I do think at some point, whether it's at conception or whether it's at implantation or where some point in there, that child in the womb is a human being. And if we believe our Constitution, we should afford every person full human rights, the primary of which of those is the right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. And if you don't have life, you don't have liberty, and you cannot pursue happiness. So it makes sense that it's the first one in the list. But don't take it from me. I'm not an expert necessarily in any field other than opinions. So I have a guest today, Dr. Ingrid Skop. And she was an OBGYN for many, many years. Now she's at the Lozier Institute, and she is far more informed on this topic than I am. So if you don't believe a word I say, you don't care what I say, well, listen to her. And by the way, there's some people you might want to hit share with because there's so much misinformation and flat out disinformation, lies out there regarding this topic. It can be a little difficult sometimes to go, what is the truth? We're going to try to get at it. Dr. Skop, thank you so much for taking the time to join us today.
Thanks, Randy. It's great to be with you today.
So, oh my goodness, where do we even start? Okay, you know what? Let me start with what I heard that is disturbing in the presidential debate, the second one, the one between Vice President Harris and former President Trump, which I discovered to my shock that pro-life laws, specifically in Georgia would be one state, are killing women. Women are dying because of these pro-life laws. And I thought, is that true? Is that true?
Of course it is not true. Every single state that has a law protecting unborn life allows an exception if an abortion is needed to protect the life of the mother. And many of the states go further to say, or to prevent substantial impairment of a bodily function. They allow the doctor to use his reasonable medical judgment. That means his clinical expertise and to follow the standard of care to determine if a pregnancy needs to end. The good news is when a pregnancy emergency threatens a woman, most of the time it happens after the baby can survive. So it's very straightforward. The doctor delivers the woman by induction or C-section if indicated, and the child can be cared for. Occasionally, usually in the situation of an incomplete or inevitable miscarriage, the process has started and the baby is still alive, but the baby will die. We can predict that the baby is not going to survive. We do know that the woman can become infected. And so doctors always, both before and after the overturn of Roe v. Wade, have been empowered to perform the intervention that's needed. I'm pro-life. I don't do elective abortions like approximately 90% of obstetricians, but in those tragic circumstances, I have intervened. And the law continues to allow that. Of course, it allows treatment of ectopic pregnancy, which can threaten a woman. And of course, it allows treatment of a miscarriage when that child has tragically already died. And yet, you mentioned the politics. If this is such a winning issue, why do they have to lie about it so much? Why are they misleading doctors, misleading the American public, and not focusing on the fact that 96% of the time abortions occur in healthy mothers and healthy babies? That's what we should be acknowledging.
Yeah, and you make an accusation there, and that is that many politicians and people in the media are lying about abortion. And I mean, that's a serious accusation. At the same time, I remember hearing, I think it was in that debate, although it may have been in the one between Biden and Trump. I don't recall which, but I've heard it many times. In Texas, they say, a woman cannot get an abortion. When some woman here, I think she had a lawsuit. And I went and looked up the law. I went, really? Is that what we passed here? Because I don't actually support that. I'm with you because, having had 4 children, we had one child whom the doctor wanted to do more tests because might have detected something. Well, I mean, you go home with that, your mind races in all sorts of negative directions. And I remember thinking, okay, if this pregnancy is going to threaten the life of the child's mother, my wife, right? I don't necessarily want the law in there telling me what I have to do. And if I have to make that hard choice, and my wife has to make that hard choice, I want us to be able to make it based on the best medical information we have. And in our case, based on prayer. I know that other people don't have that, but I thought we've outlawed abortion in every case when the life of the mother is at risk. And I looked up the law. It's not true. They flat out lied about Texas law. And anybody can go look it up. I will say you probably have to wade through a bunch of stuff to get to the actual law because the manipulation in the search engines and online is off the charts. In fact, right now I can't even get to the Lozier Institute because of some false information in evidently our network's safeguard, like keeping us from bad websites. You're being blocked. I will get around that, and I will show you the website later. But it just says that in the information age, we are fighting an information war, and part of that means lying, even about laws that are clearly on the books that anyone can presumably find. So, I mean, I guess we can speculate. I mean, why are they lying? For power? I don't understand.
Well, can I tell you specifically what's happening in Texas?
Yeah,
And
yeah.
in answer to your question, why are they lying? They're clearly lying because they want to turn public opinion against pro-life laws to destroy pro-life laws.
Yeah.
I continue to practice in Texas part-time. I saw immediately after the overturn of Roe v. Wade an intentional misinformation campaign from pro-abortion media sources, and I'm sorry to say, from pro-abortion medical organizations, telling doctors that they did not want to be the test case, that the penalties for accidentally breaking the law were severe, that doctors could lose their livelihood or end up in jail charged with a felony. By the way, no doctor has been prosecuted after the overturn of Roe v. Wade for performing an abortion for the life of the mother. So it just hasn't happened, period. But they made the doctors so afraid. And apparently the doctors did not read the law. As you said, the law is fairly straightforward.
Yeah, it is.
And in fact, the Texas Supreme Court did affirm that immediacy is not required. The woman does not have to be actively dying, and certainty is not required. The doctor doesn't have to know for certain that this complication will kill her, but we all know what complications can kill a woman, and we should be empowered to intervene at that time. What has happened with doctors is that we're not attorneys in most cases, and the law does impact our practice quite frequently. In every situation before this one, our professional organizations have explained the law to us. They've provided continuing medical education, videos, and outreach, educational outreach, so that opioid prescribing, HIPAA, the Affordable Care Act. I mean, there's a number of ways that doctors have been educated in the past, but this time there was no education. And that has led to the confusion. And I'm sorry to say this morning, ProPublica released an article implying that Texas abortion laws caused a woman's death. It appears that a woman did die outside of Houston, but when you read the article, you discover that the woman on presentation was suffering an incomplete, inevitable miscarriage. Every doctor knows they should intervene at that point, complete the delivery to protect her, and yet that woman was given no treatment for 40 hours and subsequently died of sepsis. That is not Texas law's fault. That is medical malpractice. And that is also confusion and fear mongering and inability of doctors to understand the law, because every doctor knows that was not the standard of care, what that woman was given. But again, the point is to, politically, apparently to drive, votes toward Democrats. But in a bigger picture, it's to destroy our laws so that we cannot protect unborn life in Texas and in other pro-life states.
So, we want to trust the medical establishment after COVID. There's a lot of distrust, but we want to trust the medical establishment to do the best to save life. I mean, they take the Hippocratic Oath to do no harm. But what you're telling me is that because of the politicization of even medical organizations, they allow, a woman's not getting the treatment she needs, and it's resulting in death. And so you can imagine there's cases where it's at least resulting in harm for political reasons. I mean, that seems really wrong to me.
I think it's far beyond politics. I think that there is, unfortunately, sometimes in the field of medicine, there is a eugenic motivation behind promoting widespread abortion. But I can come to no other conclusion. My professional organization, the American College of Obstetricians and Gynecologists, ACOG, has produced many statements advocating for removal of all restrictions on abortion. They say that abortion should be available without restrictions, without limitations, without barriers at any gestational age for any reason. And they recently released a press release where they said that pro-life laws are the reason for the harm, not the fact that the doctors are confused. So, I can't say why they're doing that. I'm not inside their head, but I am a member, and they have never asked me my opinion on this. They have never surveyed their membership. This is driven by pro-abortion leadership and does not reflect the views of the doctors, because as I mentioned, about 9 out of 10 obstetricians do not perform elective abortions. And yet we all are willing to intervene when a pregnancy emergency threatens a woman's life.
So when we say eugenics, are we talking like a population control ideology at play?
Well, we can see this going all the way back to before the initial Supreme Court decision, Roe v. Wade, that many obstetricians were performing abortions. They were just doing it illegally. They were doing it in circumstances. Sometimes it was minority population. Sometimes it was single impoverished mothers, people that they felt should not be having babies. But regarding children with prenatally diagnosed conditions, it is very much the case in obstetrics these days that all women are offered testing. And if the testing does reveal that the child does have a significant congenital abnormality, in many cases, abortion is being promoted to those women. I've had many women tell me, every time I saw the doctor, they asked me, are you ready to have an abortion now? So that is some of the motivation behind it. But these abortions in healthy moms and healthy babies at any gestational age, I can't speak to what is motivating that, but that is what my professional society is advocating for.
So a Down syndrome baby, they're saying your baby has Down syndrome because that's one you can tell pretty early, if I understand it right. So when do you want the abortion? Is that basically what's happening?
That is what is happening, and 2/3 of babies in our country with Down diagnosed prenatally are aborted. I think we're not getting a better society this way. We're just getting a more heartless, joyless society that we are not willing to bring those children into our community. And anyone who's known a child with Down syndrome, certainly it's hard. I'm not saying these are not hard circumstances. These are not heartbreaking for parents to see the plans that they had for a child are going to be different, but these children bring great joy.
Yeah, they do.
And, really, as a society, our conversation needs to go back to these are living human beings. Science tells us from the moment of fertilization, this is a genetically distinct human. He's dependent on his mother, but he is not his mother. He has his own unique body. And in what circumstance are we willing to end human life? Because that's really the question. That's independent of politics, that really we should be discussing.
Yeah, I have friends who have children with Down syndrome, and it's amazing to see the love in those families. And so, yeah, the whole eugenics thing, I mean, that's I don't know, that's straight out of the pit of hell. I mean, and it's also been used in the past, and I don't know that that's as operative today, but for minorities, because of this Darwinistic idea of evolution that blacks and Aborigines, or Africans and Aborigines, are at the low end of the evolution chart, and the history of abortion absolutely is about getting rid of minorities, and yet that seems to be suppressed. So I don't know. I don't want to go too far down that rabbit trail. I'm really curious. So we've heard about a couple of cases. There was one in I think it was Georgia. I know one was in North Carolina, where a woman had a high risk pregnancy or something go wrong and died because she couldn't get proper care. But I don't know that that's the whole story. Is there not these abortion pills that are hitting everybody through the mail that are less regulated, not regulated enough? Are those not causing more problems than the laws?
Yeah, specifically in Georgia, and this was also a ProPublica article that attempted to blame Georgia's heartbeat law, but both women that they highlighted, Amber Thurman and Candy Miller, obtained mifepristone and misoprostol. These are the abortion drugs, and had totally medically unsupervised abortion. A couple of important things to know about that. One is that the FDA made changes taking away all safeguards on these drugs, allowing these to be ordered online, delivered in the mail. They made these changes long before the overturn of Roe v. Wade. This was the plan all along. This had nothing to do with the Dobbs decision. And the treatment of these women had nothing to do with Georgia law, which protects life at the time of a heartbeat. But both of these women had failed medical abortions. They were suffering complications from these dangerous drugs. And so, of course, they could be treated. In Amber's case, she was suffering from sepsis, which the FDA maintains a black box warning on mifepristone. That tells us this is a dangerous drug. And they alert doctors to this possibility. She had dead tissue in her uterus. It needed to be removed surgically. Her doctors should have recognized that. She was septic at the time that she presented, and nonetheless, they waited until the next day before they attempted to intervene. So again, these things may be related to doctors, possibly medical malpractice, doctors not understanding the law, but they cannot be blamed on the law. And additionally, in Candy's case, it appears that she suffered from an overdose of fentanyl. Why would she obtain fentanyl? Because she was in so much pain from her failed medical abortion, and she did not understand, because there has been so much lying. She thought she would be prosecuted if she sought medical care. And no law in the country will prosecute a woman who suffers from an abortion. And so again, it's the lies, it's the fear mongering, it's the misinformation that are harming and killing women. It is not the state pro-life laws, because every single state pro-life laws allows a doctor to provide the quality care that he needs to protect a mother.
I think that's the important thing people need to hear. And it's it's baffling, because people say if Trump is elected next week, then he will nationalize or outlaw abortion on a nationwide level, federalize the law. He did just the opposite, with the Supreme Court appointees. And if it goes to the Supreme Court, I'm assuming they would uphold their own law. I would favor a nationwide abortion ban, except in the case, where the life of the mother is at risk. But, that's not what I would get with Trump. But yet what the other side's saying with Trump, that's not true either. And we know what we'll get with the Democrats, which is a push for nationwide abortion all the way into late term. So, I mean, I wish we, like you say, I wish we could just get beyond the lies and get to an honest discussion, because I think this obfuscation is actually part of the tactics of those who support abortion. And it's dishonest. It's just flat out dishonest. So, I don't know. What do you have strong political feelings like what's going to happen one way or the other?
Well, I don't look at this in the framework of politics. I look at this in the framework of morality and science, and what does care for a woman really look like. But I do want to, because we are in a political season, I do want to point out that there are many states that have ballot initiatives pending that people will be voting on. And those have also been framed in a very, very misleading way. They tried, again, we saw this in Ohio when the people who probably are predominantly pro-life voted to remove all restrictions on abortion in their state, because they thought they were voting for a woman to get miscarriage care. They thought they were voting for contraception. That's how the ballot initiative was worded, which was so misleading, because none of that was prohibited. But many of them are saying things like, this will prohibit abortion until viability, which people recognize as being in the late second trimester, around 22 weeks, when the baby can survive separated from his mother. But viability is undefined and is allowed to be determined by the abortion provider. He does not intend for that baby to continue living. His job is to kill the baby. Therefore, that baby will never be viable. So these laws will actually effectively remove all gestational age restrictions. And in addition, they'll remove things that most Americans agree upon, like informed consent counseling, a mandatory waiting period so a woman can consider her options, parental consent. So when people approve these ballot initiatives, what they are going to get is wide open abortion, far beyond what we had with Roe v. Wade, with no restrictions. And I would point out that in states that have no restrictions in our country, we are one of only 8 countries in the world that does not have a gestational restriction that allows these abortions so late in pregnancy. These are pain-capable babies. These are, in most cases, not life of the mother or not severe fetal abnormalities. These are economic, these are social. And I will tell you, based on women I've spoken to, many of these are coerced abortions in women who want to give birth to their child but can no longer say no to the person or circumstance in their life that is encouraging them toward abortion. So that's what's on the ballot on Tuesday in so many states. We can go back, we can try to change. If there's something about our state law we don't like, we can say we'd like to do this or add this exception. That is the democratic process. But taking that ability of the people and the people's representatives away and saying there is no restriction allowed, that is not democratic. That is a threat to democracy right there.
Yeah, and it just seems that these days, anything that the Democrats are accusing their opponents of is basically what they're guilty of. And I think this is one of those examples. Okay, I need to ask you about this idea, because we hear, just to give you an absurd example. If I came to you and said, I want to outlaw aliens abducting women and impregnating them, you would look at me like you're an idiot. That doesn't happen, right? But if we passed a law outlawing alien abduction and impregnations, so what, right? There's no harm in that. Now, I get that that's a little absurd, but when we come to third trimester abortions, and we go, we want to outlaw third trimester abortions, and they go, that never happens. I'm going, so fine. It's not going to affect anybody if we outlaw it, right? You shouldn't have a problem with the law if it never happens. Is that the truth, that it never happens?
No, it's not the truth. It does happen. And in fact, late-term abortionist Warren Hearn was highlighted by The Atlantic, and he said they happen. And he also affirmed that most of them are in healthy moms and healthy babies. And additionally, because late-term abortions are often done by labor induction, and there are many late-term abortionists who will not kill the baby by giving him an intracardiac injection of a medication that causes a heart attack, Many doctors won't even perform that step. So we know, and it has been documented by the CDC, that babies have been born alive after these abortions. And there are many states, including Tim Walz's state, a law that he signed into law, that do not require doctors to provide medical care to those babies. So when these babies are born alive after these late abortions, these are children that could survive with medical assistance.
Mm-hmm.
Many times they are allowed to be killed by passive or active euthanasia by the abortionist, and no one is monitoring and supervising these late-term abortion clinics. And so in many cases, no one knows that is happening, but it is definitely happening in our country today.
So when Trump says, some of these babies are being killed after being born, is that's what he's talking about? Because he's oftentimes not quite clear or precise.
Yes, I don't think he knows all of the details, but that statement is actually true. It is happening, and it has been documented on a number of occasions, including in Minnesota 8 times.
8 times in Tim Walz's estate. And he knows. He has to know that.
Yeah, but again, I mean, knowing that so few people are going to ask the questions, knowing that the pro-abortion media is not going to fact check them, they feel empowered and emboldened to state these lies. And, as you said, it's hard to find the truth because in many cases, Google will misdirect you.
Absolutely, they will. And the fact checkers outright lie. It's like somebody needs to fact check the fact checkers because I watch, it's insane. You watch these things and you go, I know that's not true. The Texas law being a good example. And the case about babies being allowed to die after being born, after a failed abortion attempt. I get that. But it's like, I don't know. It's crazy. Okay. The average person, last question. The average person. I mean, really yes, we should vote. We should inform ourselves, try to understand the ballot initiatives. And writing a ballot initiative to mislead you is actually an old tactic. You see it. And even some of like the funding things, I've seen it in a bond bill where it's like, oh, that sounds great. And like, wait, that's just the opposite of what it sounds like it says, So that's a tactic. So inform yourself, vote. But I mean, beyond that, I mean, we got to be ready to go to prison if we're going to protest abortions these days. I mean, because they're throwing prisoners in, people in abortion protesters in prison a little easier than they used to. In fact, you're better off burning down your city while wearing all black than you are standing outside an abortion clinic on a public sidewalk. I mean, how serious are we going to have to get about this fight to prevent innocent lives from being taken?
Well, I think it is the moral issue of our generation. And I think it is, saying that, I think it is an issue that the church needs to engage in. Mm-hmm. I think our pastors have taken a step back, have considered it to be political and are afraid to talk about it. But the Word of God tells us that this unborn child is created by God and has inherent dignity because he's made in the image of God and he is a human being. Mm-hmm. And yet we see that almost half of American Christians say that the Bible is ambiguous about abortion, and it's because their pastors are not talking about it. Despite this, a Barna survey documented that about 1 out of 5 Christians sitting in the pews week after week have an abortion on their conscience. Mm-hmm. So our pastors need to help us understand what's going on, help us understand what the Word of God says, and we all need to really do the research, find out the truth ourselves so that we can have an honest conversation. You mentioned loserinstitute.org, our website. Hopefully, if people can find it, if it's not blocked, right. They can read about all of these issues that we've discussed today and more, because every time we see these lies, this misinformation, we address it and we point you to the peer-reviewed literature. We point you to the facts. We have receipts. We can tell you what the truth is. And so I just hope that, people start to educate themselves. It's not quite too late for this election, although we're quite close. But going forward, regardless of how this election goes, we need to win hearts and minds on this issue. The law is not going to save babies, like the reality of telling people that these are human lives that are ending, and these are mothers' lives who are in many cases permanently damaged, physically, emotionally, and with mental health complications. So this is not in women's best interest, and I think we need to begin having that discussion.
And that is so true. I have interviewed people who have had abortions, Christians who have had abortions, and The physical scars are real. The complications in some cases are very, very real. But also the emotional and even the sort of the spiritual scars, the shame that they carry. That some have a hard time forgiving themselves. The regret. I mean, it's nothing good about it. And look, if you're in a position where you're in a difficult situation, and God forbid something happen with your pregnancy, and the doctors say we need to terminate. That's between you and God and your doctor. If you've had an abortion and now you regret it, there is healing for you. God can restore. You're always going to have that scar. You're always going to have that emptiness. But God can help you overcome the difficulties of that. So I'm not here to condemn anyone who's been through that at all. What I'm here to do, and what Dr. Skop has done with us today, is to present the truth to you so that you know, because the deception out there right now is unbelievable, and it's coordinated, and it is everywhere. So I appreciate you guys. Dr. Skop, thank you so much for your time and your expertise and your input. Is there anything you need to add before I let you go?
No, thank you, Randy, for this opportunity. And I just hope everyone is emboldened to find out the truth and to discuss it. We need to have a national conversation about this. Absolutely.
So we'll keep doing it here. Whichever way the election goes, this is a battle we're going to keep fighting. I oppose dehumanizing people so that you can take their lives. And I think the church should stand on the side of life because it's scriptural. And it's funny because we look back in history and we look at slavery where they dehumanized people, a class of people, and we say, oh, I would have opposed that. Well, here's your opportunity. There's dehumanization going on, innocent lives being taken, human rights being denied. We can stand up. Will you do it? That's my question for you. I appreciate you guys watching. Hit that share button. If you haven't liked, followed, or subscribed, I would invite you to do that. You'll get notifications of more informative interviews like this. And you'll have to go to Lozier Institute on your own. I can't see it here. We're going to have to get that fixed. But we're fighting it on all fronts. And I appreciate you guys being a part of the fight. We'll see you next time here on Life Today Live.
Be true to what you said on paper.